From the moment I discovered I was pregnant, I felt equal parts excitement and trepidation. I had dreamed of motherhood, imagining tender moments rocking my newborn to sleep, but I also sensed an undercurrent of tension in my marriage. Brian, my husband of 3 years, insisted his mother, Carla, come stay with us after the baby arrived. He claimed she would help me recover while he traveled for work, and at first, it sounded like a blessing. But once our daughter, Lily, was born, I realized Carla's version of help involved endless hours on the couch, the television blaring game shows, while I struggled alone. She rarely changed a diaper or offered to cook. Instead, she barked criticisms, remarking on my housekeeping and questioning my motherly instincts. Each day, Brian was gone, supposedly securing business deals, leaving me with a newborn and a woman who treated me like an inconvenience. I tried to remain polite, remembering she was Lily's grandmother, but resentment slowly coiled inside me. One night, Lily wailed with feverish cries, and Carla responded by cranking up the TV volume. Something snapped. The following morning, I asked her to leave, explaining I needed peace to care for my child. She huffed away in a storm of silent rage. I believed life would be calmer without her in our home. I was wrong. Carla wasn't finished with me. She was just getting started, and I would soon discover the depths of her spite. All I wanted was rest, love. Within days of Carla's departure, I noticed strange looks from neighbors who once greeted me with friendly waves. A woman at the grocery store asked pointed questions about my husband's absence. Gossip had begun to swirl, insidious and hurtful, suggesting I was having an affair with our married neighbor, Sean. At first, I found it ridiculous. I barely knew Sean beyond a nod hello and a single instance when he helped me carry groceries during my pregnancy. But rumors rarely rely on logic. People whispered about late-night visits, secret rendezvous, and hushed phone calls. Carla, it seemed, was the source. She told anyone who would listen that she had been kicked out because she discovered my indiscretion. I tried to confront her by phone, but she refused my calls. The rumors spread faster than I could counter them. Brian was away for another trip, and whenever I tried to explain the truth, I sensed hesitation in his voice. "Mom swears she saw something," he said once, sounding torn. Each day, my resentment grew, fueled by exhaustion and wounded pride. This was more than a rumor. It was a betrayal. How could Brian even entertain such accusations? Our marriage felt precarious, balanced on his willingness to believe me over his mother. Meanwhile, Sean's wife, Lisa, tried to reassure me they knew the truth, yet every sideways glance from a neighbor stung like a slap. Carla had turned my postpartum life into a scandal, and I was left fighting for my dignity. Desperate to reclaim control, I decided to gather evidence disproving Carla's lies. I saved text messages, recorded any phone call with her, and even checked the footage from our baby monitor, which sometimes caught conversations in the living room. Late one night, after Lily finally fell asleep, I came across an audio clip that made my stomach knot. Carla spoke to someone, chuckling about how she would teach that girl a lesson for disrespecting her. While she didn't explicitly mention the affair rumor, the tone of malice was unmistakable. I saved it to my laptop, phone, and a flash drive, determined to protect this proof. I felt both triumphant and nauseous. Knowing she was capable of plotting against me in my own home chilled me to the core. When Brian called, I played him a snippet of Carla's voice, expecting outrage. Instead, he sounded confused, caught between loyalty to me and devotion to his mother. "I'll talk to her," he promised, but I heard the uncertainty in his tone. My anger grew. This wasn't just about gossip. It was about my husband refusing to take my side against a woman bent on destroying me. I realized I might have to protect Lily and myself without his help. Carla had declared war, and I refused to surrender my dignity. I would fight back with every ounce of determination I possessed, no matter the strain on my marriage. Exhaustion clung to me, but fury fueled me. In that moment, I vowed revenge. The next morning, I contacted Lisa, Sean's wife, inviting them for coffee. They came over, visibly uncomfortable with the rumors. Sean reassured me he would talk to anyone who doubted my fidelity, but the damage was done. "I can't believe she stooped so low," Lisa whispered, shaking her head. Their empathy steadied me, but didn't erase the anxiety coiled in my stomach. My husband was supposed to be my partner, yet here I was pleading my case to neighbors like a defendant on trial. After Sean and Lisa left, I sent Brian every piece of evidence I had. The audio clip, texts from neighbors describing Carla's gossip, and even a screenshot of a vile message she sent me personally. That evening, he finally agreed to fly home early. When he arrived, he looked haggard, torn between disappointment and confusion. Sitting at our kitchen table, I demanded he confront Carla with the truth or risk losing me altogether. "I can't live like this," I said, tears burning my eyes. He nodded, still reluctant to see the malice in her actions. But I wouldn't relent. I told him she needed to publicly retract her lies, or I'd take legal action for slander. My hands trembled as I spoke. Carla had underestimated me, and Brian saw for the first time how serious I was. I wouldn't forgive her. I wanted retribution. If protecting my daughter and my reputation meant scorched earth, so be it. I finally understood this was my battle to win. Brian called Carla the next day. I listened quietly on speakerphone, heart pounding. She denied everything at first, claiming I fabricated evidence to frame her. Then, when Brian mentioned legal action, she switched tactics, sobbing about how she'd only tried to protect her son from a deceitful wife. "Do you hear yourself?" I cut in, voice trembling with rage. "I just gave birth, and you accused me of cheating with a man I barely know. You've humiliated me." Carla went silent, then hissed that she owed me nothing. My chest tightened at her audacity. Brian ended the call abruptly, staring at the phone as if it were a venomous snake. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never knew she could be so cruel." For a split second, I pitied him. His mother was dragging us all through the mud, and he was losing the illusion of her goodness. But the sting of betrayal still burned. I reminded him that unless she publicly recanted her rumors, I would contact an attorney. Brian nodded grimly, resignation etched in his face. I braced myself for the next move, determined to shield Lily from the fallout. If Carla refused to back down, I would force her hand. There was no turning back now. She'd chosen war, and I would not rest until she paid for every lie. Forgiveness was impossible. I wanted justice, no matter what it cost me in heartache. This fight was my right, my power, and I wouldn't shrink beneath her malice. In the days that followed, I met with a lawyer named Ms. Tran, who specialized in defamation cases. She listened intently as I recounted Carla's antics, from the baseless affair accusations to her refusal to apologize. Ms. Tran explained my options. I could file a civil suit for slander, seek damages, and possibly obtain a restraining order if Carla's harassment continued. My stomach twisted at the idea of taking my mother-in-law to court, but I saw no alternative. I refused to be bullied or slandered any longer. When Brian heard about this plan, he grew pale, wrestling with the enormity of suing his own mother. Still, he admitted he'd seen enough. If Carla wouldn't stop, we had to protect ourselves. Meanwhile, I continued to endure suspicious glances from neighbors. Though some now believed me, Carla's rumor still lingered like a foul odor. One evening, she called Brian in a rage, claiming I was turning him against her. He simply told her to stop spreading lies or face the consequences. Her shrill voice echoed through the speaker, promising retaliation, but no amount of yelling could intimidate me now. Carla had already unleashed her worst, and I had survived. My fury burned bright, erasing any guilt I once felt. She would learn that I wasn't some timid girl to be crushed. With Ms. Tran's help, I filed an official complaint, prepared for war. Carla wouldn't see my mercy, only my resolve. When betrayal cut me, I cut back deeper, unflinching in defense. The legal process moved slowly, but my determination never wavered. Brian and I argued often, not because he doubted me anymore, but because he grieved the irreparable fracture with his mother. Sometimes he asked if there was any way to reconcile, and I reminded him forgiveness was off the table. Carla had lied about me, refused to repent, and publicly smeared my character. My self-respect meant I wouldn't tolerate her toxicity. Brian attended counseling with me, hoping we could salvage our marriage. The sessions were draining, unearthing deep wounds in our relationship. I clung to the possibility that we might rebuild, but my trust in him was scarred. He hadn't stood by me right away, and that hesitation left a mark. Meanwhile, Carla escalated her campaign. She tried leaving cryptic notes in our mailbox, harassed Sean and Lisa, and even sent Brian's sister sobbing voicemails blaming me for tearing the family apart. Each time, I documented everything for Ms. Tran. The lawyer assured me Carla's behavior only strengthened our case. I lay awake nights, listening to Lily's rhythmic breathing, fighting a swirl of emotions. Was I turning into someone as ruthless as Carla? When doubt crept in, I recalled her smug smirk, the lies that left me humiliated, and my resolve solidified. I would not be her victim. I would show her exactly who I was, a mother, a wife, and a woman who wouldn't bend before betrayal. Victory was my right, and I would seize it without remorse. Eventually, Ms. Tran arranged a mediation, hoping to resolve matters outside of a courtroom. Carla arrived with a pompous lawyer who tried to dismiss my claims as family disagreements. Ms. Tran countered with the baby monitor recordings, neighbor statements, and records of Carla's hostile messages. Watching Carla squirm, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. This was Lily's grandmother, a woman who should have loved her unconditionally. Instead, Carla chose spite. At one point, Brian confronted her, voice shaking with emotion, pleading for her to admit she lied. She refused, crossing her arms and sneering at me like I was dirt beneath her shoes. Mediation ended in a stalemate, with Carla storming out. Ms. Tran said we had enough to proceed with a lawsuit if necessary. Brian's shoulders sagged under the weight of it all. That night, we argued again. He begged me to reconsider for the sake of peace. But peace had been shattered the moment Carla decided to destroy my character. I refused to waver. If she wouldn't retract her lies or apologize, I wanted the courts to force her hand. Maybe Brian wept for his mother, but I wept for my lost innocence, my shattered trust, and the countless nights I cried into my pillow, wondering why my husband hadn't defended me sooner. Carla's cruelty lit a fire in me that no amount of pleading could quench. My resolve was unbreakable, and I vowed to see it through, no matter how it ended for us. Weeks later, our case was set for a hearing. Tension rippled through my chest each day leading up to it. Brian moved out of our bedroom, too overwhelmed by guilt and sorrow to share a bed. I found comfort in Lily's bright eyes and fragile laughter, reminding me I fought for her future as well as my own. On the morning of the hearing, we arrived at the courthouse, subdued and grim. Carla sat with her lawyer, chin thrust high. My pulse pounded as Ms. Tran presented the evidence, recordings, texts, statements corroborating Carla's defamatory remarks. Her lawyer blustered that families have disagreements, but the judge seemed unimpressed. Finally, Carla had a chance to speak. She claimed she truly believed I was unfaithful and only wanted to protect Brian. Her crocodile tears provoked a flicker of sympathy, but the facts stood against her. In the end, the judge ordered her to sign a formal retraction and cease all harassment. If she violated these terms, she would face heavy fines or worse. I stood outside the courtroom, clutching Lily's car seat, feeling both victorious and hollow. Carla swept past me without a glance. My victory tasted bittersweet, for I knew nothing would fix the rift she had carved into my life. But I had stood tall, rejecting the role of victim. My name was cleared, my dignity intact, and she would never cross me again without consequences. As we left, Brian tried to speak, but I shook my head, unable to bear. Over the following weeks, Carla stayed silent, bound by the court's order. Her retraction arrived in the mail, a dry, legalistic statement admitting she had no proof of an affair. There was no apology, just formal words forced by the law. Still, it felt like closure. The gossip in our neighborhood subsided, with Lisa and Sean helping spread the truth. Yet the damage lingered in my marriage. Brian tried to comfort me, but I was numb. Whenever I looked at him, I remembered how he hesitated to believe me. The therapist suggested time and open communication, but I wondered if some wounds cut too deep to heal. Late one night, Brian found me in Lily's room, holding her close. He kneeled and whispered that he was truly sorry, that he loved us. I listened, tears slipping down my cheeks, but I couldn't find the words to forgive. My heart felt like it was wrapped in barbed wire. Perhaps someday trust would return, but not now. I told him simply that I needed space. He nodded, tears in his own eyes, understanding we were at a crossroads. Carla had exited our lives, but her poison remained. Still, I had held my ground. I would never regret taking vengeance when wronged. A piece of me had hardened, but it protected me and Lily from future harm. Maybe that was the price of survival. I tucked Lily in, holding her tiny hand, resolved to never let anyone break me again. My story was far. Months passed and Brian moved into the guest room. We lived like roommates, sharing chores and childcare but avoiding deep conversations. The counselor encouraged us to talk openly, yet I couldn't shake my anger. Brian had allowed his mother's venomous lies to stand unchallenged until I forced his hand. Each time I remembered the humiliation I felt, I grew distant. Slowly, though, small glimmers of hope appeared. Brian cut all contact with Carla, returning her letters unopened. He showed genuine remorse, organizing date nights and even scheduling a spa day for me. I watched his efforts, uncertain if my broken heart could mend. Over time, we laughed again, sharing jokes and reminiscing about Lily's first words. Yet, a fortress of caution remained around my emotions. One evening, as Lily slept, Brian and I sat outside, stars twinkling overhead. He took my hand, tears in his eyes, and repeated his apology, promising never to doubt me again. For the first time, I sensed sincerity strong enough to penetrate my defenses. I rested my head on his shoulder, uncertain of the future, but willing to try. In that fragile moment, I understood that betrayal leaves scars, but life can continue if both hearts strive to heal. Carla remained in exile from our home, and I refused to forgive. Yet, I held on to a small spark of hope for us. Maybe the worst was over. Maybe we could find our way back to love. The scars would remain, but I no longer bled. A year later, I stood by Lily's crib, watching her peaceful sleep, thinking about how much had changed. Carla had faded to a distant shadow, bound by legal consequences if she dared to harass us. Brian and I were still together, but we'd lost something intangible, an innocence, a naive trust that once made me feel secure. Yet, in its place, we grew stronger, forged by hardship. I learned that I could stand on my own if I had to, that nobody could trample my dignity without consequence. Sometimes, I looked into Brian's eyes and saw regret, a silent plea for forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. Perhaps one day I would, or perhaps the memory of his indecision would always sting. Regardless, I refused to let it define me. People sometimes ask how I could cast out Lily's grandmother, and I answer simply, she chose her path when she lied about me. I will protect my child from toxic influences, even if they share her blood. My conscience is clear. Revenge wasn't sweet, it was necessary. I harbored no illusions of reconciliation. By refusing to forgive, I kept my self-respect. Betrayal deserves consequences, and Carla reaped what she sowed. Each morning, I kissed Lily's cheek, grateful we survived intact. My boundary stands firm, a fortress around us. Nobody would ever shatter me again. I told myself that justice might not heal every wound, but it gave me closure. When I close my eyes at night, I no longer fear.